good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Rebel News Daily live stream, what we're calling Breakdown. And I'm joined by a new face today, not a new face to the team, but a new face to the hopefully still clean Airbnb in Ottawa that's serving as our satellite studio, Alexa Lavoie. How's it going, guys?
Oh my God, what a day. I'm sure that you were overwhelmed from what happened today. It was incredible.
I am exhausted. I feel about 20 IQ points stupider, and I feel like all of my psychic energy was drained by listening to lies, obfuscation, and far more words than necessary to say the thing that you wanted to say. I felt like Justin Trudeau was just talking to wind down the clock on some of the adversarial lawyers. What do you guys think?
No, you're totally right. I mean, Justin Trudeau, we know how he is. By the way, nice to see you too, Sheila. I didn't get an introduction after being out of the live stream for 2 days because I was sick. The commission was so long. It was a very interesting day. Justin Trudeau's testimony, you saw him lie multiple times. He said that he never called unvaccinated Canadians names. He said, I never did that. Yes, you did, buddy. You said it in French, which is the reason why you did parts of your testimony in French, because you wanted to make sure that we couldn't just clip it right away. It was lies after lies after lies, manipulation, trying to say something longer than she wanted to. And Eva Chipiuk's strategy in her cross-examination was great because it didn't give him time to actually walk around the answer and talk around the answer. She took the time that she needed to make her point. She made it great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before we get too far into the weeds here, I should tell everybody what we're doing. So we are covering, this is our daily analysis, and today, thankfully, is the last day of witnesses and testimony after 31 days. Why does it feel like longer? It feels like longer, but it also feels like less. Of the Public Order Emergency Commission, what we're calling the Trucker Commission, because it is the fail-safe examination built into the Emergencies Act to prevent tyrannical buffoons and egomaniacal crybabies like Justin Trudeau from invoking a wartime law on peaceful dissidents, which is exactly what Justin Trudeau did when the anti-mandate convoy for freedom rolled into the nation's capital. And so right now, this is, as I said, the public examination. All the decision makers are being called, all the fact finders are being called, and even some of the victims were called. And as William alluded to, convoy lawyer Eva Chipiuk was the real star of the show today. Mm-hmm. She got her chance to cross-examine Justin Trudeau, and she had a clever strategy, because Justin Trudeau is, if nothing, a predictable idiot. And she knew that he was going to waste time and not answer any of her questions anyway. So she really didn't ask all that many questions. What she did was she took the opportunity to do what the truckers went to Ottawa to do. And that was to make Justin Trudeau hear them. And so part of her cross-examination was her reading statements from people who were either in the convoy, or people who were in Ottawa, or people who felt nothing but despair until the truckers rolled through their town, or were appalled that because of the Prime Minister's rhetoric that they could no longer visit. There was division in their family. People were saying that they should die or be denied health care. She made Justin Trudeau sit there, and whether or not he took it to heart, I doubt, but he did have to sit there with an awkward, goofy grin on his face while he heard pleas of Canadians. So well done, Chipiuk.
Sheila, if I can just super quick say what you just said in a different way, because I think it's relevant. Brendan Miller, you saw him throughout the inquiry bring a lot of legal precedents, bring a lot of legal questions of why it was not legal for the government to invoke this unprecedented Extraordinary Emergencies Act on the peaceful protesters who were in Ottawa to protest the government. And I mean, it was all in the record, the unlawful redactions. I mean, we've got a bunch of documents that are all redacted. One document we saw today had tons of pages redacted. So he was there on the legal side. He did an excellent job doing the legal side of things. And today, I think that we saw Eva Chipiuk play on the emotional side and show the emotional part of the Emergencies Act inquiry. What happened? Why were the protesters actually in Ottawa? She showed the emotional side of the inquiry. And I think that both Miller and Chipiuk created a great combination together, and were able to achieve the goal of the Freedom Corp. What do you think?
But I would say, but first of all, I saw Mr. Trudeau using a lot of speculation instead of basing his statement on fact. It was like, but if a police officer will have been killed, or a grandma who have been, I don't know, like run over by a truck. But this is speculation. Base yourself on fact. What really happened? Did that happen? Do you really think that this was going to happen? Oh, I'm sorry. A woman was trampled by a horse, but that was not from the convoy. That was from the police. You didn't mention it. But anyway, it was really interesting to see the commissioner needed to intervene of the audience, because the audience was laughing or reacting to what Mr. Legault. I'm in Quebec now, Trudeau.
Wrong tyrant.
The escape will come later. But the fact that the commissioner needed to say, please stop laughing and reacting to Mr. Trudeau's statement, or we will enforce it. So afterwards, like, people get back to calm, but it was kind of a different energy. The place was packed. Not a single seat for the audience was available. Some people were waiting online outside in case that some place was available, because if you were leaving the place, someone were capable to take your place. And the security was enforced, and we were scanned at the beginning. We were searched by dog, and Mr. Trudeau didn't pass by the normal place that witness usually pass. It just sneaked in on the back, and it just disappeared afterwards, like for making sure that nobody had the chance to ask question or to challenge him with other question afterwards.
Well, people were waiting outside, but they also opened a second auditorium in the commission in the back, where the lawyers usually go, from what I understand, for people to watch the commission inside the building. So I'd say there was probably around 70 people, a little bit more inside the commission room. Then there were probably 10 to 15 people consistently waiting outside the commission. And then there were probably around 20 people in the auditorium. It was huge today.
Efron tells me that my microphone is clicking again, and I just want to apologize if anybody at home is experiencing that. It's a Skype issue. It's not a microphone issue.
Seems fine to me.
Okay, great. Hopefully it's good, because even when I listen to the playback, I'm like, Sheila, gosh, you're annoying. Let's go straight into some of these clips, because Justin Trudeau, you know what he's like. He likes to be the bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral. And today he was fashionably late, but I would say it was more like obnoxious. Let's roll clip 1, please. Olivia.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll take a few minutes. I'm not sure what process is, a bit anticlimactic.
Should we take 5 minutes?
I think we'll take 5 minutes then and see, and you can come and get me when it is. Thank you.
The commission is in recess for 5 minutes, la commission avait pour 5 minutes.
Go ahead. It's just a bit of a false start.
it was so funny to see his face when he entered, and everybody was going to stand and maybe do something, and he was just like looking at everybody like, and it was like, do you realize you're late and everybody was waiting for you?
Oh, of course he realized he was late. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about anybody's time. He doesn't care about respecting the commission's time. He knows that these guys are on a tight timeline. By him being late, a lawyer didn't get to ask an extra question because he's got to keep her on a tight timeline, and Trudeau doesn't care.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though. Trudeau was at the commission 40 minutes before the beginning of the inquiry. He snuck in the back. We saw the 3 government SUV go in the front, stop at the front. And I thought, oh, well, he's going to enter in the public entrance and we'll be able to actually film him. But no, those 3 same SUVs continued. And surprisingly, a few minutes afterwards, he was inside the commission. But he was there 40 minutes early. And he still found a way to show up in the actual room about 40 seconds to a minute later than he was supposed to. That's our national drama teacher.
I think it's his version of a power move to make sure that everything's running on his time. I'm gonna skip ahead, Olivia, and we're gonna go to clip 4 because I know we have a gazillion clips. And as I said, I don't have the psychic energy for this today. I had to listen to Justin Trudeau talk for like 8 hours straight. Let's go to clip 4. I know you guys did too. Let's go to clip 4. Justin Trudeau said the quiet part out loud, and then he realized that he had said something stupid, and since he is a buffoon, he tried to fix it by making it worse. Let's go to clip 4.
But in terms of responding to their demands or legitimizing them by engaging, I'm highlighting that I'm worried about setting a precedent that a blockade on Wellington Street can lead to changing public policy. People need to be heard, but we need to get that balance right. And then she agreed that I need to be cautious and I don't want to set any bad precedents.
Okay, so fairly self-explanatory. There's a willingness to discuss, but you were concerned about setting a precedent where a blockade could equal a change in public policy. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we have a robust functioning democracy, and public protests are an important part of making sure we're getting messages out there, and Canadians are getting messages out there and highlighting how they feel about various issues. But using protests to demand changes to public policy is something that I think is worrisome.
Okay, thank you.
Although, sorry, to a certain extent.
No, please go on.
Protests, if you're out protesting that the government is shutting down a safe injection site or something, you are asking for changes in public policy. But there is a difference between occupations and saying we're not going until this is changed in a way that is massively disruptive and potentially dangerous, versus just saying, we're protesting because we want public policy to change, and we're trying to convince people to get enough of them that politicians will listen to enough people saying, okay, I'm going to lose votes if I don't change this. That's the usual way protests can be effective in our democracies.
What an idiot. What an absolute idiot. Like, he says you shouldn't protest to change public policy. That's literally the main reason people protest, especially the government, is for a change in public policy. And then when he goes to correct himself, because even he realized, hey, that's a really stupid thing I just said. Mm-hmm. But when he tries to fix it, he does something extra. Because then all of a sudden he says, not all protests are bad, just the ones that disagree with my progressive viewpoint. And you can come to that conclusion based on the example that he gives. So first he says, no, you can't be protesting for a change in public policy out there. What do you people think you're doing? And then he says, oh, no, wait, that's a bad idea. If you want to protest, let's say, because the government's closing a safe injection site where you can give yourself poison to put yourself in an early grave, that's fine. So as long as you're protesting for things that Justin Trudeau disagrees or that he agrees with, that's not worrisome. So yeah, when he tried to fix it, he made it worse. But I think that's the story of the prime minister in general.
And by the way, I don't know if you realize, but through the old commission, everybody have different date where the Emergencies Act was actually bring it up for maybe a potential strategy. Some people have say that it was on the 4th of February. Today, Justin Trudeau, we're talking about the 10th of February that really begin to talk about the Emergencies Act. It was saying that in the same day, he said that it was at the beginning an idea to stop the blockade. So who is lying or who is not telling the truth there?
They are contradicting themselves the more they talk. So Justin Trudeau says the 10th, but then he said it was an idea from the very beginning. I think that's clip 6. We can throw to this, and then I have just some quick notes about what some of the other snake cabinet ministers said throughout the week, what their timelines were. And it's so weird because they're all sitting in the same cabinet meetings and all saying different things. So let's go to clip 6, if you wouldn't mind, Olivia.
Etc. And I'm wondering if you can describe, if someone asked you, when did the Emergencies Act come into play as a possibility? How would you answer that?
Oh, as an idea, it would have been from the very beginning in the back of our minds. Is you see a situation that is an emergency, is out of control, has a potential for real impact on citizens, potential for violence, real concerns about what's going on, not just in Ottawa, but right across the country. At the Coutts blockade that started up on the same first weekend that the Ottawa occupation did. These are the things that you say, okay, as we look at a whole range of potential outcomes in this, there might be a moment where we have to invoke the Emergencies Act.
That make me almost laugh because afterwards he was talking about, but we needed to have the Emergencies Act for compelling the tow truck, and I was just like, did you use that because nobody wanted to comply to the fact that you wanted them to do the dirty job, but nobody wanted to do it, so you had the trouble to make them compelling to what you asked, and so you decided to take the Emergencies Act.
Well, not only that, that's what I was just looking at on my phone. I was trying to find Section 2 of the CSIS Act. And Justin Trudeau mentioned the potential for violence or the potential for
it's not potential, is it?
Activities. Well, that's what I was just looking at the CSIS Act, and I see Section A, espionage or sabotage. The B, foreign influence activity. C, activities within or relating to Canada directed towards or in support of a threat or use of acts of serious violence. And D, activities directed towards undermining by a covered unlawful act or directed towards or intended ultimately to lead to the destruction or overthrowing of the government. Nowhere here you see the potential for an unlawful or violent
Smart
activity,
young
because
man.
then as soon as someone walks around in the street and I see a car coming at me, but I know there's a red light, I guess I'll just call Justin and I'll tell him, Justin, can you please invoke the Emergencies Act? Because I feel there's the potential for me to be hurt by the car. The car might run me over. Justin Trudeau is not a lawyer, even though he tried to act like a lawyer. Justin Trudeau did said a lot of false
The drama
things.
teacher.
Yeah, he's our national drama teacher. He said a lot of false things today at the commission. I don't think he had a proper understanding of the law, and I think the way he was trying to phrase it, he tried to reframe the law to make it fit his narrative. But when Eva Chipiuk or Brendan Miller, Alan Hunter, who I see is in the Airbnb right now, go on the stand and actually ask questions, they're able to set the record straight. And those are the cross-examinations that I feel are most relevant for you to watch.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Trudeau said it was a consideration from the beginning. Then he said it was February 10th. Bill Blair told Global News before forgetting that he told Global News that he wanted to
liberal
invoke it from the
memory.
very beginning. Yeah, it's Bill Blair amnesia, and it was contagious. Everybody caught it in the cabinet meetings. It's worse than COVID. Then we've got David Lametti about 30 hours into the convoy. He was saying maybe we should use the Emergencies Act on these people.
Or
Like maybe
tank.
we should
You
crush
forgot the
them.
tank.
Or a tank, you know,
Why
like
not?
maybe we could drive over them with a tank. There was a lot of peeks into Justin Trudeau's mind, and nobody wants to do that. But we got paid
Yeah.
to do it today, so we did it. I think it's clip 13, where he is going through in obscene minutia, just the soul-sucking conversation that he made us all sit through, that he was having with himself. So he's having this like internal back and forth with himself. But hey, Justin, should we do this? I don't know, dude. Would it be cool? Why don't we skateboard to work? Like it was just nonsense. It's clip 13 where he's going through like the internal struggle he would have us believe that he had to put up with before he invoked the Emergencies Act. Like anybody believes any of this BS. Anyway, it's 13.
He felt
And
bad.
I reflected briefly on, first of all, the reassurance that it gave me that the entire system, all the inputs in the system had come up to the clerk of the Privy Council, the top public servant in Canada, impartial, professional public service, making the recommendation to move forward on this was essential to me. But I also reflected on, okay, what if I don't sign it? What if I say, okay, we now have advice from the professional public service to invoke a public order emergency. And I decide, you know what? Let's give it a few days. Where the professional public service had made a determination that the thresholds were met, that the use of it was appropriate and, you know, responsible, and the measures were the right ones that we were going to put in it. And I said, no, you know what? Let's wait and see another few days, another week to see if we really need to do it.
As if it will have done that.
Right.
Waiting.
Right. I wonder what I would do. You know, Justin, let's sleep on it. Let's pray on it, Justin. Like, nobody thinks that he had a serious internal conversation, an internal dialogue with himself about invoking the Emergencies Act. He said it was something he wanted to do from the very beginning. He did it. And now he's trying to rewrite the law to make it fit what he did. That's what the whole 31 days comes down to. 31 days, the government said at the very beginning, we're going to do this to these people. Why? Because we don't like what they're saying and they're embarrassing us. And then now they're trying to gaslight us and rewrite history and make us think that the Emergencies Act says something that it definitely doesn't, so that they can get away with invoking a wartime law on peaceful dissidents in the nation's capital like he's Hugo Chavez.
Yeah, well, I think rewriting history, because I know I only have a few minutes on. I just want to touch on one point before I let Alan Hodder join the live stream. Talking about writing history, rewriting history, the government of Canada, this is definitely what they're trying to do, and they're trying to do it in an unfair manner. We keep seeing the pages of redacted documents. We see literally complete pages of redacted document. For what reason? Well, we see S39, parliamentary privilege, S37. But the worst one of all of them, in my opinion, is irrelevant. Who are you to decide whether or not an information is relevant? And even if it's irrelevant, why should it not be put at the commission? And today we saw Rob Kitteridge bring that point up. There's the government of Canada who deemed a section of a document prior to today as being irrelevant. And then today, Rob Kitteridge brought that up, showed what they actually thought was relevant, and they were talking about tow trucks and about strategies to get more tow trucks and things in relation to tow trucks, which means that it was in direct relation to the Emergencies Act inquiry, to the Emergencies Act itself. So the government is playing unfair games, and they're trying to rewrite history in an unfair manner.
And I'm sorry, but I
Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead.
just because of the redacted document I was saying, I I actually love so much when the lawyer say, you will agree that you want us to read the plan, but you will also agree that we cannot read it because it was just a big square blank.
There was more to that. So that was the lawyer for the CCF, so the Canadian Constitution Foundation. Yeah. Justin Trudeau had said, I think it was, right? Is that right?
I think it was Rob Kitteridge from the GCCF.
Yeah. No, there's another one. No, there's another one. We're talking about the police plan. So Justin Trudeau had said earlier in his testimony, everybody should really read this police operational plan. But then Justin Trudeau goes on to dismiss the operational plan as no real plan at all. And then so the lawyer, I think it was for the CCF, could be the CCLA, but I think it's the CCF.
It's clip 22.
Yeah, it's clip 22. Let's show that because it's really something else. Justin Trudeau says everybody should read this plan, but guess who didn't read the plan? And there's no possible way he could have because it's completely redacted. And he dismissed the plan as no plan. And it's like, you didn't even read it. What do you mean? Like, it was just crazy. But good for, I think I'm 99% sure lawyer for CCF. Good for him for producing that and noticing that Justin Trudeau lied through his teeth earlier in the day. It's clip 22, if you wouldn't mind.
So I certainly had not read it on the 13th.
Okay. And so I'd like to just, Mr. Registrar, I'd just like to walk the Prime Minister through the pages, not so he could read it because we don't have time, but just to point out that this is a heavily redacted document. So page 1 is the cover page. Page 2 is this signature page. If we could go down, page 3 is a description of the situation and the mission. And then, Mr. Registrar, if you could please scroll down. The rest of this document has been redacted. So that's page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8. So, Prime Minister, you said we should read this plan. We can't. It's within your legal authority to instruct your counsel to remove these redactions. For the sake of the transparency of this commission, sir, would you consider that request?
I object to that. On behalf of the Government of Canada, it's Brian Gover once again. This is putting the Prime Minister in an odious position.
Prime Minister, can I put it to you this way? You said we should read the plan, but I think you would agree we can't.
Indeed. As I said, I haven't read the plan, but we're in a situation where, as can be imagined, I have access to unredacted information, and what I know and my understanding of this plan was, and I'm happy to testify to that, that it was not a complete plan of engagement.
But he also didn't read it. He's like, everybody should read the plan. Okay, can we? No, we're not gonna remove those redactions. Oh, also, you didn't read the plan? No, but I understand it's incomplete, and I'll testify to that. How the hell do you know that? Like, it just
it just touches on the whole unfairness and a completely absurd and ridiculous way that the government of Canada is conducting itself. The DOJ is redacting those documents because they're irrelevant, and we're seeing this plan. That's a super important plan. Yeah. That's huge. And we saw at least 4 pages of it absolutely blank. We're not able to read anything about it because our corrupt government is redacting all of it. It's unbelievable.
And did you see the face of Justin Trudeau trying to not starting to laugh out loud? Like, he's just like,
you know what? I was watching his face as like the lawyer is like, okay, well, we go on the first page. Oh, and here's the table of contents. Like, here's the cover page. And then it rolls up to black. But like Justin Trudeau, when he's like, okay, well, here's the cover page. And he's like, yep. Here's the, as though he had seen it before, but he totally didn't. And like, here's the table of contents. He's like, yep. As though he had seen it before, which he totally didn't. And then this just black pages. He's so stupid. He's so stupid. I feel better now laughing at him.
Better to laugh than cry.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a situation to laugh at a little bit. Alice, I know that we have Alan Honor on.
Yeah, let's get Alan.
in a few minutes, but just before Alan comes on, I want to touch on the closing statements because I don't think that a lot of people have seen it, and I think that you left right before those happened.
Unfortunately.
And the closing statements were very interesting. You saw basically the parties taking position on whether or not the use of the Emergency Act was necessary or not. And there's some parties like the city of Ottawa, I'm not sure what their position was. It didn't really specify a specific position. Same for Windsor, or the Ottawa Police. Windsor Police Service as well. However, the OPP said they would stay impartial. Freedom Corp, we all know what their position was when they were against the Emergencies Act. And I suggest that everyone go take a look at Eva Chipiuk's closing statement.
I think we're gonna post it in full on the website. It was incredible. You could tell she was starting to choke up a little bit. She was the perfect bookend to Brendan Miller running hot all the time. She was thoughtful. She was she really spoke for the people who just wanted their prime minister to listen to them. And she spoke to the hurt that caused them to go there. And she said, these people were coming to Ottawa to protest the government's overreach. And you know what the government did to them? Overreached again on them. She said the government chose force, state violence, instead of peaceful engagement. Every time.
Don't forget what Mr. Trudeau say. Oh, I moved, and I was moved, and I was like, no, you're not moved.
He moved out to the cottage. That's what he did. As soon as they got there, he's like, I'm going to the cottage. We're out of here. Oops, I got COVID again. It's that time again. I got COVID, and he moved out of town.
He said that during the last cross-examination. But to come back to the closing statements, the government of Alberta firmly stated that they were against the use of the Emergencies Act. Government of Saskatchewan firmly stated against the use of the Emergencies Act. Government of Canada, all in favor of the Emergencies Act, because according to them, Keith Wilson admitted during his testimony that the protest, quote unquote, attracted, what did they say, violence, ideologically motivated violence and violent group to Ottawa. So according to them, it was all justified because of this alleged accusation. Of course, well, as we said, the Emergency Act was not necessary according to Freedom Corp. And one last person that I want to touch on is the Indigenous group from British Columbia. Well, I missed part of their cross-examination, but in the part that I remember, they said that the use of the Emergencies Act, the consultation that the government did prior to invoking the Emergencies Act, they didn't take into consideration the Indigenous community, and they had, quote unquote, a lack of respect for the Indigenous community. And here's the reason why that's funny. Justin Trudeau keeps saying that he's the biggest purveyor of DEI. He's the biggest feminist out there. He's the most inclusive prime minister we've ever seen. He loves Indigenous communities, even though he's not providing clean water to them. He loves the Indigenous people. And I've got the chief of the Indigenous chief, something like that, from British Columbia, who says that he had a disrespect for Indigenous communities. So anyway, that was my rundown of the closing statements. And I think shortly we'll be able to move on to Alan Hodder.
And I just need to specify that they got like some representative from Saskatchewan and Alberta government take a cross-examination. Like they were there, they asked questions, but they were the less there when the Emergencies Act was deployed. Either Ontario, Quebec, the one who were there the most, providing policy and supporting the Emergencies Act, none of them came and talked.
Well, and they also, in the case of Quebec, they didn't invoke a state of emergency on their own. So they didn't they didn't bother to take, again, the whole point of the Emergencies Act is you've ran out of tools. Quebec didn't use the tools at their disposal. They didn't use their level of emergency. They just hit the nuclear button.
Well, seven out of all the provinces didn't use the Emergencies Act.
Yeah.
7 of them. Anyways.
Yeah. So now I think it's time for changing guests.
Yeah, Alan Hodder, yeah.
Which one of you is swapping out? Are you both going?
I'll go. I'll go sit on the couch and listen to you guys. It was a long day, a long
I
6
believe
weeks.
it.
I've just
It was.
recovered from my little sickness. I'm able to speak today. Yesterday I wasn't able to, and then my throat is starting to hurt a little bit right now again. So yeah, it's been a fun, long, and interesting 6 weeks.
Yes, it has, William, and thank you very much for your hard work. You are a working journalist twice your age and holding some of the most powerful people in this country to account. So I'm really proud of the work that you've done over the course of the Trucker Commission, but even before that, when you were cutting your teeth, doorstepping politicians to the point where now I think they're going to build a tunnel to get away from you. They're going to burrow through the city streets. I know, like a mole. I'm like, that's William. William did that.
Well, in all fairness, they started building the weird thing that's going to take more than 15 years to build prior to me starting to question Omar Jabra, but they are actually building a tunnel between all the government buildings. Yeah, but thanks for your words, Sheila.
Yes. Let's hit an ad and then we'll bring Alan onto the set, please.
Oh, hey guys, have you checked out our Rebel News store lately? You really should, because we're always adding fun things into the store. As the news changes, I guess so does the merchandise. We've got something for everybody. We've got a great selection of pro trucker merchandise, like this excellent honk honk shirt right here that will surely drive all your liberal friends and relatives absolutely crazy, although I don't think the trip is all that far. But right now in the store, this is my very favorite t-shirt, and I know t-shirts. Free Tamara, in support of convoy leader Tamara Leach, as she is treated like a common terrorist by Justin Trudeau's government for her role in the peaceful weeks-long street party against COVID mandates in Ottawa. I've got great news though, if you can't decide which shirt is your favorite, because right now at rebelnewsstore.com, you can use the coupon code FALL, F-A-L-L, and buy 2 t-shirts and get 25% off. And as always, shipping is free. So head on over to rebelnewsstore.com, pick your 2 favorite t-shirts, and save 25%. Thanks, and remember, free Tamara.
Freedom in the year 2022, for me, folks, it means the return of Rebel Live. Now, Rebel Live is an annual event we used to put on before the man, or was it the COVID Karen, made us shut it down during the pandemic years. It is a freedom fun fest, if you will. All the freedom fighters you've grown to know and love over the years, they're going to be speaking at the Toronto and Calgary events. The Toronto event is on November 19th. That's a Saturday, and it will feature the likes of Dr. Julie Ponesse, Archer Pawlowski, Tamara Leach, and all your favorite rebels, including yours truly. I'll be the MC that day, Sheila Gunn Reid, and of course, the big boss man himself, Ezra Levant. Now Saturday, November the 26th, we're bringing Rebel Live to Calgary, and those aforementioned speakers will be there, and Sheila will be the MC for that event. You don't want to miss it. It's an all-day freedom fest. I know there are certain would-be conservative leaders that think freedom is overrated. You know, we don't think that way. I don't think you think that way. So if you want to get a ticket, and please go to the website. They are going fast. Go to rebelnewslive.com. That's rebelnewslive.com. Get your orders in, and as Billy Red Lions used to say, folks, don't you dare miss it.
Don't you dare miss this one.
Well, hello, Alan. How's it going?
Hi, Sheila. Great to be here.
Are you as glad as me that this is all over?
It is a relief. It'll be a weekend off, and then I guess we'll move into drafting submissions.
Now, since you're a lawyer, I want to ask you, what was the one legal thing that stood out for you today? I watched this through a layman's set of eyes. For me, shocking once again that they're releasing documents in the middle of testimony of Justin Trudeau. Documents relating to his testimony were being released an hour into his testimony. What was the one thing for you that really stuck out today?
Well, what I thought stuck out the most, it happened in the cross-examination of Justin Trudeau by the lawyer from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. And what she managed to do is to nail Justin Trudeau on the test, and on the test he considered when invoking the Emergencies Act. Because Sheila, as you might recall, we all thought we knew the test that was being used to invoke the Emergencies Act. And then we got a surprise when we heard from the director of the National Security Intelligence Advisor and the clerk from the Privy Council. And then I don't know about you, Sheila, but I was quite surprised when I heard the director of CSIS say that he recommended the invocation of the Emergencies Act when he was simultaneously saying that it didn't meet the threshold under Section 2 of the CSIS Act. So we were all confused by that test, and we wanted an explanation. And what were they considering? And I think that lawyer nailed down for the first time that whatever maybe the context is the same, maybe the context might be different, the purpose might be different, the decision maker might be different, but the test is the same whether you're getting a wiretap under the CSIS Act or whether you're invoking a public order emergency under the Emergencies Act. And that was the big breakthrough that we've seen today.
Yeah, because for the last, I would say, 2 weeks, they've really tried to sort of blur the lines between what we all thought the bar or benchmark was to invoke the Emergencies Act. I think it was probably universally understood that it was Section 2 of the CSIS Act. And then that changed, didn't it? Once we heard, okay, CSIS said, no, it didn't rise to that benchmark, then all of a sudden we're trying to change the definition of the Emergencies Act to fit what the Liberals had done after the fact.
Right. And, you would read the CSIS Act, and then you would read the Emergencies Act, and then you try and figure out, is there some contrary intention in this Emergencies Act that I'm not seeing? And you read it over, and it's not just that, Sheila. You're trying to figure out exactly what is their position, right? You're trying to pin them down. And if you remember, David Lametti, the Minister of Justice, when he was testifying, he wouldn't talk about the evidence that he gave to cabinet, which we talked about before, and that fair enough. But how are we supposed to know what they really considered if we don't know that?
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I thought was really odd. And it came, I think the lawyer, we talked about it just briefly, but I'll get your sort of legal opinion on it. I think it was the lawyer for the CCF who showed Justin Trudeau that entirely redacted document that he told everybody earlier in the day, you should read it, except he also admitted that he didn't read it. And then, so the lawyer for the CCF says, well, if we should read it, could you have your lawyer just remove those redactions? And no, they oppose the release of that document.
Right. I mean, that was a masterful moment by the lawyer from the CCF. Are you playing the clip, or should I comment on it?
No, you just go ahead and comment on it. We played it already, but it was kind of funny because it's scrolling slow, and then oopsie daisy, there's all the black.
Right. So, and I believe that one was redacted for it was redacted for, I'm not even sure, I can't recall the privilege. It was most likely solicitor client privilege, or to be honest, Sheila, I just don't remember. It's been such a busy day, but it was a type of privilege that I think Trudeau could waive, and he refused to do it. And and his lawyer objected, and objected rightly, but it did send a certain message, and it was one of those fun moments at the commission.
Yeah, let's show clip 4, another fun moment in the commission. If you think that your prime minister lying to you is fun. So clip 24, it's in and around the time that a deal had been struck with the convoy to alleviate some of the pressures on downtown. And Justin Trudeau claimed that he became aware of it. We've heard previous testimony that he was well aware of it. Cabinet knew about it. Several people have testified to that, including, his inner circle, but also police. And he said that he was advised that the agreement wasn't holding. But we didn't hear any testimony at all that the agreement wasn't holding. In fact, we heard from, city manager Steve Kanalakos from OPP that indeed they had moved 100 trucks in good faith, or 100 vehicles, in good faith out of the downtown core. So the agreement definitely was holding, but Justin Trudeau just decided it wasn't. And decried it as fake news. Let's show that clip, because it's really something else, because he's literally the only person who was saying that those trucks weren't moved. Even the craziest counselors said those trucks were moved. Let's go to clip 24.
And at the IRG meeting, you were advised that there was a breakthrough agreement between the Mayor of Ottawa and the convoy organizers to move trucks out of the downtown residential areas. Isn't that correct?
That is not how I remember it, no.
Okay, well, I can advise you that at the inquiry, it was confirmed by the documents your officials filed here and by witnesses, namely Jody Thomas. She confirmed that at that IRG meeting, you were briefed that there was an agreement with the mayor. Does that, do you recall that?
With whom? With the mayor and who?
Some of the convoy organizers.
Which ones?
Well, Tamara Leach, who's present here in this room, signed a letter. It was made publicly available on the news on Sunday, February 13th, and you were advised of that agreement at the IRG meeting.
And we were also advised that that agreement wasn't holding, and that many of the convoy had decried it as fake news and not actually an agreement that they would abide by.
And you learned that on Twitter, is that correct?
No, we learned that at the IRG.
By whom?
By our elected officials.
Thanks.
That's not what the official said, is it?
Why don't you tell us, Sheila? You've been following this so closely.
Well, it's true. That is, the officials never said that. They said, Steve Kanalakos, people from the OPP said, nope, they actually did move 100 vehicles, some of the big trucks and smaller vehicles. And I think one of our Airbnb friends there today, Tom Marazzo, was instrumental in doing those things. And it was, in fact, the invocation of the Emergencies Act itself that put an end to that, because it caused a redeployment of police to the protest.
That's right. It's really striking that, in Ottawa, things were really starting to settle down. Trucks were moving out of the residential areas onto Wellington. Some of them moved, some of them just left.
Right.
You'll recall that evidence. And there was a plan in place. Why was the Emergencies Act invoked at that time? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that it was invoked when that was happening in Ottawa, when things had settled down. The bridge had been cleared in Windsor. We all know that. We've heard that many times now. The situation in Coutts was, we know from the First Minister's meeting that it was about to resolve as well. They were about to take action, and it did resolve the next day, right? So why then? That's sort of an unanswered question, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. And in fact, we know the situation in Windsor had resolved right then, because all those additional OPP officers were redeployed to Ottawa to deal with the convoy because Windsor had resolved.
Nobody is even disputing that fact. Everybody acknowledges that the situation in Windsor had resolved. You saw the note from the First Minister's meeting today. Justin Trudeau was commenting on what an amazing job the police did in Windsor. It was a complete success story. Dana Early, who was the superintendent, who was also a superintendent early, she's a member of the OPP. She was the critical incident commander in Windsor. She received an award for the job she did. And afterwards they had all those concrete barriers in place. Along here, I think it's called Huron Church Road. And so I don't think they had to be too worried about, they certainly didn't have to be worried about trucks blocking the Ambassador Bridge.
No. And that was one of the things Justin Trudeau said, even though these things were resolving, we still needed the Emergencies Act to make sure that they didn't remanifest somewhere else.
he seemed to think that the situation wasn't improving, which was to me that was contrary to the evidence. I think it was improving, and the biggest concern was undoubtedly the Ambassador Bridge, and nobody's contesting that situation hadn't resolved, or at least the crux of the crisis was passed.
Right. Which leaves us with revoking or invoking the Emergencies Act because of inconvenience in Ottawa. Really.
Right. And, I think that it's very troubling. We heard a lot of evidence early in the commission about how the powers from the Emergencies Act were useful but not necessary. And a lot of this is just because of timing constraints, but nobody really challenged those witnesses on how awful that was. It is quite useful to take away people's charter rights.
Yeah.
I always think of the truck drivers because I think they were very much the tow truck drivers. I think they were so overlooked because they were compelled to do something that they didn't believe in. It was against their moral beliefs. It was against their political beliefs. They were compelled into servitude, and that is so degrading. But it was very useful to be able to compel those tow truck drivers. And maybe that didn't happen. We heard that it didn't actually happen. They didn't actually have to compel anyone. But that's beside the point. That's what the measure allowed for, right? And that's what's so offensive. And I think it'll be a stain on our history. That's something that we just, we thought, well, it would be, this is something that Trudeau said today. He said it would be useful to be able to compel tow truck drivers. And at one point when he said that, he said, to fulfill their contracts. But it wasn't just to compel people to fulfill their contracts. It was more universal than that.
Yeah, it was to indenture those people as tools of the state. And I know Hatim Care from the JCCF really hammered the ministers the other day on that issue of, did you ever have any consideration for the charter rights of tow truck drivers that you press ganged into servitude against their will and often against their conscience?
That's right. He and I were talking about that throughout the inquiry, and we were trying to figure out, well, where can we get this in? And you only have so much time with every witness, and he did such a good job of that, and was so happy to see him bring that point home very clearly.
So what's left to do with this commission? What are the next steps? Who's doing what now?
Well, so there are two major steps. So for the parties, like the Democracy Fund, the JCCF, Citizens for Freedom, we're going to be concentrating on written submissions. Now, perhaps you've heard some submissions today. They were 5 minutes each. Those aren't the real submissions. The parties were just asked to put something together to assist the commissioner, because he has a huge amount of work to do. And the written submissions are not due until the 9th, but I think this will help him to stay quite productive in that interim period. And there will also be a policy phase. And, Sheila, I think I'm quite worried about the policy phase.
Me too.
I think even if we had a favorable result in the commission, and if the commissioner said the invocation was not justified, we could get some very bad policy recommendations coming out of this commission. We've seen some of the things that the other parties want, right? They want to clamp down on what they say is misinformation. But that's a dangerous thing, because who determines what is misinformation? I think they're probably going to want to make, some people will probably want to make the Emergencies Act more flexible and easier to invoke. And I don't think that should happen either.
No, I think it should be even more clear and more difficult. And that is my concern too, is they're going to see the recommendations of the commissioner, the findings of the commissioner, and then change the law itself to make it easier to invoke. And we're bordering on normalizing invoking this thing. We heard today that Justin Trudeau wanted to invoke it to deal with the pandemic, and the First Minister sort of talked him out of it, and he couldn't be talked out of it this next time around, it sounds like. And so I'm very concerned about making this thing easier to invoke because they haven't had even a moment of sober second thought. There's not even a single person expressing any sort of regret for how Canadians were treated in all of this.
Yeah, that's right. And I would actually like to see the act clarified. Because when you read that section of the Citizens Act, when you read Section 2C, which we've been so focused on, it talks about acts of serious violence and threats of serious violence, but it's quite close to the definition of terrorism as set out in the criminal code. Right. And that's a very high threshold. And when we think about what happened in Ottawa, we don't think about that as terrorism, do we? No. Most people don't. No. And if that's there were documents, there were Citizens documents, and that's how they kind of referred to that area. I'm guessing here that they just had their own convenient way of referring to it, and they call it terrorism and extremist violence.
Right.
But that's not what was happening. We didn't see that.
No, and I would like to see even that section itemized. It even feels a little just too vague as it is right there when threats of serious violence. I've listened to people tell me that honking is violence during this commission. So I would like to see that just tightened up with a few more specifics.
Right. It doesn't really help when we take a word and it sort of changes its meaning, right? It really waters down the concept, and we've been doing that for a long time, but now we see the effect it can have in real life.
Yeah, the real life consequences. Yeah,
I think you're right. We should clarify that. And there is a case from the Ontario Court of Appeal. It came out a little while ago, and I can't remember exactly right now. The name of the case escapes me, and part of the reason is because I'm just thinking about it on the spot. But they looked at the definition of free expression, and you might be aware, Sheila, that violence is an exception to free expression. Expression protects anything that conveys meaning, right? That falls within the ambit, right, but not violence. But the Court of Appeal judge in that case who wrote the decision made this distinction. He said, no. But when we're talking about violence, we're talking about physical acts of violence. We're not talking about words.
Right.
Right. So there is some good precedent out there, but we got to make sure that it stays that way.
Right. I don't think we need the university humanities student definition of violence creeping into our legal system. Alan, I want to thank you so much for the hard work that you've been doing, and hopefully you can take a little bit of a breather as we move into this next phase, and just thank your family for letting us borrow you in the fight for freedom for so long.
Well, thanks, Sheila. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Olivia, let's go to an ad so we can let Alan lead the set, please, and we'll bring on Tom. Thanks, Alan.
Speaking with opposition leaders, the federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act.
Have you checked out the Rebel News store lately? We're always adding new stuff, and just in time for Christmas, we've added some very fun trucker Christmas stuff. I cannot wait to get some for myself, but also for my family. And actually, I can get the shirt I want for myself for free. And so can you with our new coupon code. The coupon code is Christmas. And if you buy 2 unisex shirts, you get the third one for yourself for free. Just go to rebelnewsstore.com,
coupon code Christmas to buy 2 shirts and get your 3rd one free. Oh, hi, Tom. How's it going? I am a little sad that our fast friendship over the convoy will be sort of, I don't want to say it's going to be put on ice, but we're not going to see you every day.
No, this is my last show.
Sad. I hope we can figure out something else to keep you around.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I guess that's my job.
You guys are a lot of fun. You guys are a lot of fun.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about the final day of the commission. And as I was saying to the kids, I say kids because William's involved. but it felt longer than 31 days, but also shorter than 31 days somehow simultaneously. It's very strange. But I think today the star of the show, as I said at the beginning, was Eva Chipiuk.
Yes.
The perfect tone. And she decided that she was going to take her time to make sure that the people who went to Ottawa to be heard by their prime minister were at least able to be heard by him. And he couldn't squirm, he couldn't run away, and he couldn't call them names. He couldn't.
Yeah.
And the worst part was he tried to say, I didn't call them names, which he definitely did every opportunity that he had. But I mean, Eva really put it to him. These are the people you hurt.
Yes.
And, and he decided to do an ad for Pfizer instead of actually listening and acknowledging the pain he caused.
Yeah. And you know what? We were all so proud of Eva at the end of that. Yeah. And I can speak from, I'd like to be able to say I'm speaking as her client, right? But it's not that. It's a deep friendship that I've been fortunate to be part of with Eva and Keith and a lot of other people that were part of the convoy. And every day Keith and Eva were there with us during the convoy, when they got involved. And I'm so proud of Eva for how she did that. And she was the perfect person to go and deliver that message today. Like we kind of looked at the whole legal team today and said, okay, who's the best to go and deliver a message on behalf of Canadians that we didn't get to deliver to Justin Trudeau last February when we were begging for it. And Eva was the perfect person to go and deliver that message. And that's why, the team, as a team, we all decided that, today is not about the legal arguments, because Brendan Miller had done a great job. He brought us to the 1-yard line. Yeah. But it took somebody like Eva to really put the ball into the end zone, and she delivered it like a master.
Well, we know how Justin Trudeau feels about, how he feels about smart, powerful women that he can't control, right? They tie him in a real knot. And I'm sure he was excessively uncomfortable today. He prides himself on being a feminist, except until he runs up against a woman who's far smarter than him. And that's what happened to him today.
That's exactly what happened to him today. And what I loved about it is that Eva really made him confront the harms that he had done in the most limited amount of time possible too, right? I had seen her statement. We had all seen her statement. They were working on it pretty late last night, and her questions, sorry, not the statement, but her questions to him. And she rehearsed it at lunch, timed it and everything. And, with only 10 minutes, she had 10 minutes in this entire 10, almost 11-month ordeal to make Justin Trudeau confront the names and the faces of the people that he deliberately and solely impacted. The decisions rest at the top. They, like it or not, whether you voted for Justin Trudeau or not, he is the final decision maker in the government of Canada. It was his determination to see that the Emergency Act was invoked against Canadian tax-paying citizens and voters. And she got 10 minutes to make him really look at the human cost of what he has been putting Canadians through. And it was pretty disgusting and disingenuous the way he said, that final question she asked him, that final one at the end. And his smug answer was, I'm not afraid, and neither is my government. It's like, you know what? I'm sure Herman Goebbels said the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. We have that at clip 27. Maybe we'll show that. It was really something else. Because it was truly a question that Canadians do want answers to. And she took the opportunity to ask it. And he just sort of, with this smug little smirk, he just so smug. Anyways, I'm at a loss for words. Let's roll this.
Minister Blair, Public Safety Minister, Minister Mendicino, National Security Intelligence Advisor Jody Thomas, and RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, and today you testified that the federal government was committed to exhausting all alternatives to a resolution prior to making a decision to invoke the extraordinary powers of the Emergencies Act. Do you agree that that accurately describes your government's position?
That the invocation of the Emergencies Act was a measure of last resort, was not something to be taken lightly.
Thank you.
And something to do when other options were not effective.
And you are aware that the OPP, along with others, developed an engagement proposal, and you were advised of that proposal at the IRG meeting on February 12th, correct?
It was a proposal, but we had, and it was presented to us, we had more questions about how it would actually work. It was not a complete proposal.
My last question, Mr. Prime Minister, when did you and your government start to become so afraid of your own citizens?
That's a very
I
unfair...
am not, and we are not.
Those are my questions.
Get his stupid face. Oh,
it's pretty cringy. That's for sure, right? Like she asked an important question that he had to have known that she would have only asked if she wasn't representing at least 6 million Canadians in this country, and his immediate go-to was to grin in pure defiance, and then to use words to say, I'm not and we're not. Basically, it's very grotesque to see. And one thing I noticed with him, unlike any other witness that we had seen, there were several times that he would actually turn and face the audience and lecture the audience.
He's performing.
He was performing. I was almost expecting to hear his father's eulogy that, basically put him on the map. I was expecting to hear a tear or see a tear or something. I thought he was going to be going for, a Juno Award, to be perfectly honest. It's a very surreal thing to sit in the room. That's the first time I've ever actually been in the same room as him.
I'm sorry about your luck.
Yeah. I'm going to go have a shower tonight. Anyway, I find he was so incredibly well prepared for that. And I heard other people say that, in the back room today, to say how surprised and how comfortable he was in that room. He had a smugness and arrogance about him that was different than I noticed in the other two, the previous days, Mendicino and the Attorney General.
Yeah, he's an actor, though.
He's an actor.
This is just his stage.
Yeah. Sorry, I've still got the cold, the Ottawa hack. I get it every time I come here, apparently.
Now, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. I'll give you a little break here. Let's go to clip 25, because this is after Eva reads those statements about people who are saying the people are so whipped into a frenzy that they're saying that I should be denied health care, that I should die. Friends and family are divided from each other based on government rhetoric. She goes through these statements, and Justin Trudeau doubles down and says that he wishes he could have done more. This his Pfizer salesman routine to get people vaccinated. What the hell? Anyway, let's roll clip 25. What a ghoul this guy is.
Yeah.
You have now heard the statements from some of the many concerned Canadians who felt compelled to support the protesters. Do you now understand the reason so many Canadians came to Ottawa with such resolve in the midst of a harsh, cold Canadian winter because of the harms caused by your government COVID mandates, and they wanted to be heard?
I am moved, and I was moved as I heard these testimonies, as I saw the depth of hurt and anxiety about the present and the future expressed by so many people. The COVID pandemic was unbelievably difficult on all Canadians. And my job throughout this pandemic was to keep Canadians safe. And the way that I chose to do that was to lean on public health officials, lean on experts and science on the best way to keep Canadians safe. And because Canadians got vaccinated to over 80%, we had fewer deaths in Canada than places that didn't reach that. And every heartbreaking story I hear of a family who sat beside the bed of a loved one dying because they had believed that the vaccines were more dangerous than the disease, I take personally, because I wish I could have done more
And
to
I don't mean
convince people
to cut
to
you
get
off.
vaccinated.
Eva is somehow the most patient person on the face of the earth. I don't know how she stood there and listened to him make the cries of Canadians about himself, about how he takes things personally. As I said to William and Alexa, Trudeau just loves to be the bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral, and he did it there too.
Yes, absolutely. And I've often joked and said, yeah, the best way for the human species to get back to the moon is if they get vaccinated, right? Somehow getting vaccinated just solves every challenge, every problem. Yeah. He's a one-trick pony with that line. And he just, it's wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. It's the same talking points. And he was born into this line of business, right? I mean, from his father, he's been around politics since he was, a child. So he understands what it means to spin and to reframe. Like, he's been doing it probably his whole entire life. And you just saw like a master, like he should be doing master classes on how to spin things towards your own advantage. And you're right. He's always the bride, never the bridesmaid. That's for sure. In terms of somehow this making himself the benevolent leader of all things good and wholesome. And it's frustrating to watch because he completely ignores the central point of what Eva was saying. You now just heard all of the reasons why Canadians endured a hard, cold Canadian winter. They didn't do it because they needed a vaccine. What they did it for was because they lost their jobs. They were demonized by him and everyone who followed his rhetoric, demonized by the media. I lost my job. Why? Because the judicial system in this country, the doctors and the lawyers, and I say with exception, of course, failed to follow basic principles of their professions and to abide by informed consent, which is criminal code stuff. When you violate informed consent, it's actually criminal assault. Where were the lawyers when this happened? How is it that all of a sudden a host or hostess in a restaurant is now able to, with impunity, violate the Privacy Act of this country? These people, leadership started at the top with the Prime Minister. And with impunity, every level, every institution in this country took the lead from the Prime Minister of Canada, and they violated every single law and institution that was meant to protect us. So if people believe for a minute that this had anything to do with COVID-19, why we were protesting had nothing to do with COVID-19. It had everything to do about the rule of law in this country and how COVID was the symptom that proved that it was easy, flawlessly easy in this country to just violate your rights, because now our rights, COVID was the test, and the test proved that our rights were easily violated by the government. Why? Because when the government gets cornered, they just reframe the definition of what laws are supposed to mean, like we saw between the Emergency Act and CSIS Section 2. They just reframe the whole narrative and give themselves extraordinary powers to violate our rights. So to me, it never had anything to do with the shot or COVID or lockdowns. It had everything to do with the fact that the rule of law in this country is paper thin, and that premise is supported by the actions of all the courts and all the cowardly lawyers and doctors in this country.
It was a large-scale ASH conformity test. And if you've ever been in a room alone with Ezra for about 20 minutes, he'll open up his phone and make you watch an ASH conformity test video. And the ASH conformity test, for people who don't know, it is it's really based on an appeal to authority. So will you go along to get along if everybody else in the room is saying one thing, but you 100% know that that it's wrong? This is the ASH conformity test.
Yes.
And so these guys are being shown, I forget what they're being shown here, but basically there's one guy in the room who's not part of the test. Everybody else is part of the test. Like they're actors in the test. And I think it is, okay, can you tell me which one is the shortest? And so everybody else is picking one that is not the shortest, and you know that's the shortest, but will you go along because everybody else is? Or are you the kind of person who says, I won't go along? And what happens is, in some of these tests, is they'll have one or two people who are also not part of the actors in the test. And once somebody breaks, everybody starts breaking. And that's what the convoy did. The convoy was a nationwide ASH conformity test where you knew you believed a certain thing. You knew certain things to be true. But until the truckers said, no, this is BS. We don't have to live like that. And we don't have to get forcibly injected against, as you say, unemployment and not a disease. Once they stood up, everybody else stood up. And that's what's happening here. It was a nationwide ASH conformity test.
And you know what, I want to say something, and I please, I don't mean to make this about me, but I want to draw on an actual experience that I had with this exact same thing, because I'm very aware of this phenomenon. Usually the story I've heard is about a bunch of monkeys in a cage with a ladder, but I'll leave that one alone. But here's the thing. When I got fired from my teaching job, the college I belonged to put out an email from the president of the college, and she used language like, let me be clear, very aggressive language in her letter. And I looked at that and I said, well, because of my Army pension, I'm a little bit less financially vulnerable, but even if that didn't matter, I still would have said, no, that's wrong. So I stood up and I actually sent an email to as many faculty, the president herself, HRVP, and all the deans that I personally knew, and all the faculty, saying, this is wrong. I don't know how you're getting around all these Canadian laws. This is immoral, illegal, and unethical. And funny, I got fired the same week as Julie Ponesse. And she did the same thing in her school. And so there was people that, they were the ones that were the non-actors inside the test. And you know what? I fully expected all of the other people to come out of hiding and back me up and say, you know what, Tom, you're right. Because I put my personal email on the email to all the faculty. We're talking like 250 people. I expected them to all back me up. And you know what happened? The exact opposite. The horde actually turned on me. All of them, including my own boss, the dean that I worked for, and a bunch of people. And somebody said, you know what, let's kind of speak out against this guy. One of the PhDs said, no, I think we should speak out against this guy personally. And this was the test that the college I belonged to in Barrie failed miserably. Right? And I hate to say it, but I hope someday in the future I run it. And I've lost friends. I lost good friends that I worked with. They all turned on me. But that's not unusual given this time. But I think this test is bigger and more serious than we all think it is, because, it's like you're doubling down with hypnosis. Or mass formation psychosis is what it's now popularly phrased as. It's disturbing. I expected people to back me up, but they didn't.
There's another experiment, and I think about this all the time. Every time I see one of these public health officers, I call the Milgram one.
Milgram, yeah.
The Milgram experiment, because we all went through exactly that. When we have our public health officers, I call them public health necromancers because they use the dead and dying to control the living. But the Milgram experiment, for people who don't know, is what will you do if somebody in a lab coat tells you to do it? Would you shock another person until you maybe think they're dead? Would you do it if a guy in a lab coat told you to do it? And a surprising number of people you think are smart would do it. Because a guy in a lab coat, you don't even know he's a doctor. Like literally, they never even told these people that guy's a doctor. He just wore a lab coat, which gives off the perception of that he's someone of authority, someone who knows better. And basically they said, would you keep shocking this guy? Now, nobody was actually shocked. I think the guy was an actor. But a substantial amount of people would do whatever a guy in a lab coat told them. And if you've been on Twitter lately, you know that those people are real and they are wearing masks in their profile pictures.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we should go to, we should wrap up because these guys have had a very long day. I bet you guys all want to go for beers together.
Sorry.
It's okay. Let's go to clip 26. It's Eva reminding the Prime Minister what his role is as the Prime Minister, and it's not to divide the country into medical status.
People have testified in this inquiry referencing your widely published comments and calling the unvaccinated racists and misogynists. And we have heard testimony in this inquiry about how some of your officials wanted to label protesters as terrorists. Would you agree with me that one of the most important roles of a Prime Minister is to unite Canadians and not divide them by engaging in name-calling?
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names. I highlighted there is a difference between people who are hesitant to get vaccinated for any range of reasons and people who deliberately spread misinformation that puts at risk the life and health of their fellow Canadians. And my focus every step of the way, and the primary responsibility of a Prime Minister, is to keep Canadians safe and alive.
Small fringe minority with unacceptable views is what he called them. And that's not, he didn't preface that with saying, oh, but these are people who are spreading disinformation about vaccinations. He didn't say that. That's what he called the convoy.
Well, fun fact, how many Canadians ever heard the word misogynist until it was uttered by that man? How many people honestly ever used that word in this country until Justin Trudeau? Basically, he should literally. Rob Kittredge is a patent lawyer. Maybe I should, talk to him about helping Justin Trudeau out on that one, right? He's like the whole room. Like Rouleau at one point had to threaten to clear the room on our side of the room because the crowd was really having a hard time, choking down his lies.
Yeah. I mean, it is absolute gaslighting. They are extremists. They don't believe in science. They're often misogynistic. It's a small group, but that takes up space. So what do you want to do with them, Justin? What do you want to do with them? This is genocide talk, by the way. Like when they're like, oh, they're just taking up space. What do you want to do with them? Where should they go? Like you want to follow the science. Things take up space when they exist. So what do you want them to do? Not exist?
Yeah. And add that to the level of fear. So if we go back a year ago in this country, let's talk about the level of fear that we had. We had Quebec, who was now threatening to not let unvaccinated people get groceries. We had slow rolling, I'll use that as a joke, slow rolling lockdowns. We had mask mandates. We had vaccine passports. We had quarantine hotels, and you guys covered it extensively in the GTA, where in the early days of the quarantine hotels, I remember a story you guys did where there was a woman taken by law enforcement right off the plane and ushered to a quarantine hotel, and they refused to tell her husband or speak to her husband of the location she was going, and she was in a Suburban for well over an hour traveling to an undisclosed location. And as far as I'm concerned, that's kidnapping. If I was her husband, I would have been on the phone calling the RCMP to say that my wife had been abducted, because it's exactly what it was. And you know, you look at, combine that with all the rhetoric coming from the mainstream media, that newspaper article that came out last year, all the tweets, the quoted tweets on the front page of one of the mainstream newspapers, vilifying unvaccinated people. If you look at the level of fear that people in this country were going through a year ago, no wonder that convoy rolling across this country was A, humongous, and B, so well supported by millions of Canadians and Americans and Europeans in this country. And so they're all sitting here as if though these benevolent leaders, you know, were protecting and not doing enough to protect their children. Well, I'm sorry. You disgusting people set the conditions for a level of fear that nobody has ever seen on this continent, other than maybe the Japanese that were interned in World War II.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was. Or let's say Indigenous people that have been interned in this country. This is how we all felt. We all felt like this was 1933 and Adolf Hitler had just been put into power as the Chancellor of Germany. This is how people that were unvaccinated felt in this country. And why? Because of Justin Trudeau and his cabinet.
And they didn't know when it was going to end. You know, there was no end in sight. They kept saying, follow the science, but anybody who was looking was thinking, they're not following the science. So what is going to happen to me next? And so, yeah, there was a substantial portion of Canadians, 6 million of nearly 40 million Canadians, were basically othered from society, abandoned by their friends, put out of work, abandoned by their family, not allowed to travel, disconnected, couldn't celebrate holidays, couldn't go work out, couldn't watch their kids play hockey. And Justin Trudeau just sort of shrugs it off and says, no, I didn't play any sort of role in doing that to those people.
I didn't do enough, which means I didn't finish the job. Why? Because a whole bunch of truckers came to Ottawa and put a stop to his plan. Yeah. And that's the reality, right? There's people that started this convoy, you know, and then you can't do anything without the support of this. And all of the people that came to the convoy on weekends, like we spoke about the other night, they were the perfect examples or sample of everything that is Canadian. From every province they came to this country, and every territory was represented at the convoy in Ottawa and other locations. So, you know, that's the big question that really I don't think was explored nearly enough by any of the legal teams. It's like, why did all of these protests pop up all over Canada and then all over the world? Why? Because free citizens were terrified of their own governments. And they took it upon themselves to push back, which we all believed was our Section 2 Charter right, the right to peacefully assemble. And again, I still have yet to hear, the commission's over, but I've yet to hear at what point did the convoy become illegal. They still can't answer that question, but they just say it's an illegal illegal occupation, a blockade. These are all military terms, by the way. They're not meant for your citizens. We were not an occupying army, which is the definition of the word. But I understand the context. But in reality, let's talk about how much fear occupied all of our minds as 6 million unvaccinated Canadians.
Yeah,
it was overwhelming at times. And I mean, do we really want to talk about the number of small communities that have popped up all over this country in more rural areas? People are walking away from society because they realize how disgustingly corrupt it is in this country. Right? They don't want to be governed anymore. They're taking steps to form their own independent communities. They're homeschooling. They're finding medical needs. They're getting out of the system. And I can't say I blame them, because that's the exact reason why I bought all my land, because I'm done with this crap.
Well, as they say, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I think the natural human inclination is to be free. People will only be they will only be caged birds in fancy cages for so long until they've had enough. And, you know, while Justin Trudeau, as you say, wants to be a benevolent leader, I'm just looking out for my people. I'm keeping them safe. You're keeping them caged. And sometimes, you know what? I'll be an ugly seagull flying free before I'm a fancy little parakeet in a gilded cage. That's for sure.
Agreed.
Well, you know what, Tom?
Absolutely.
I think we should leave it on that note. I think probably my friends in the studio there, both in Toronto, but also in the satellite studio of the Airbnb, would probably like to go and get something to eat and maybe a beer and celebrate the end of 31 long days of work. Tom, thank you so much for your stand for freedom from the very beginning, but also for your expert analysis from the inside of both the commission, but also from inside the convoy from the very beginning. You know, you don't have to come hang out with us every night in the Airbnb, but you do, and we appreciate it. And you always bring a very unique perspective. And like I said, I'm sort of sad that it's coming to an end. This is probably one of the good things that came out of the commission. Yeah.
I'm going to have to go get a job as a Walmart greeter. So if Walmart, you're listening, I'm looking for a job now. Does having a master's degree qualify me to say hi to people at Walmart? I hope so, because I'm tired.
Olivia says we have one chat. I'm not sure where it is, though, Olivia. Maybe we should get to it because someone was generous with us. I'm looking. Oh, were they pinned in the main thread? Okay. Well, I don't know where that is, and I'm looking right now on my phone. I have one from Annalisa, 1964. Sorry, if we can throw to that one first, because that's the only one I have. Perfect. Annalisa, 1964, gives us $10. Says, I must send a big shout out to William, you manly man. Don't worry, Sheila. My sweet Menzies still has my heart. Oh, this is Annalisa. Yeah. David Menzies in the bloodstream like an AstraZeneca clot with her. Anyway, she says you're all amazing. And then we've got Shauna Marie, G83, $10. Alan, this is for Alan Honor. Alan, you did an amazing job. I think it was very wise to have you speak last, as you're articulate and very matter of fact, but your demeanor is thoughtful, and therefore you represent the truckers very effectively. Yeah, he does a great job. And Shauna Marie, G83, gives us another $5. I can't believe Trudeau had the audacity to swear on the Bible and blatantly lie. I have lots of things to say. I'm just going to keep them to myself. If in the end justice is not served, he will have to meet his maker and experience the full wrath of God for his actions. You know what? From your lips to God's ears, Shauna Marie. And another one from Shauna Marie, G83, 5. God love Eva. She brought heart into it. Boy, did she have. She was fantastic. The perfect bookend. And says, I truly believe that Trudeau doesn't have a compassionate cell in his body. It's a battle between those with integrity and those without. Like everything, Sean, I think it's a battle between good and evil. And the good news is that in the end, and it might be long, but good always wins.
Can I give one last final thought?
Yeah, of course.
So I started watching Rebel at the beginning of the pandemic. I didn't watch any mainstream media, nothing. And you know why I watched you guys? Because your segments were always so long and you guys never gave yourselves an opportunity to edit the story. It was always raw and it was always as truthful as you could possibly make it. And you covered all of the stories that people needed to hear. The stories that were not getting out, that were being literally stonewalled by all the mainstream media and the government. And you guys went out and you fought at a lot of personal cost. You know, you got Alexa that got shot in the leg by a projectile. People were pepper sprayed. You guys covered all the stories. You got arrested. You know, you guys fought to get the truth into the hands of the people. And so, you know, to have the opportunity to participate with Rebel News and to come here, I mean, my time for you guys is a thank you for you guys. It's not, you know, it's not taking away time from me. It's actually me giving back to what you guys did for me personally in the 2 years and a half now leading up to this commission. So I really want to thank everybody at Rebel News for everything you guys have ever done, fighting for the stories and telling the truth to Canadians, because without you guys, nobody would have ever had a fair chance at learning what the hell was really going on in this country, because you guys were the first and the only true ones out there digging for the truth. So thank you guys so much.
Well, Tom, I really appreciate those kind words. You've spent some time with us, so you know that we're all just normal, average people. And I think that's what I strive to do here at Rebel News, is give a voice to the normal, average person that the mainstream media generally looks at like they're a zoo animal. But at the end of the day, none of this is possible without the support of our viewers at home. You know, that we see it all the time when we're out on the streets. There are people who are cheering for us to just keep going and keep fighting and telling the stories that matter every day. So while you're thanking me, I'm going to thank our viewers at home and everybody who supports us, particularly at truckercommission.com. We don't rely on Justin Trudeau. We rely on the support and love of our viewers, and we feel it, and we're grateful for it. And so on this very last day of the Trucker Commission, I just want to thank everybody at home for their ongoing support of us here at Rebel News. And with that, Love Fest, let's wrap her up. And as David Menzies always says, stay sane.
What do you say, sir, to the suggestion that the decision to invoke the Emergencies Act on February 14th of this year was politically motivated?
My motivation was entirely about ensuring the safety of Canadians. My secondary motivation was making sure Canadians continue to have confidence in their institutions and in our society's ability to function and enforce the rule of law when it's not being respected. Politics was not a motivation at all in the invocation of the Emergencies Act.